This is Stigma, where we talk with leaders from many industries about how mental health and addiction have impacted their lives. Many people suffer silently from mental illness, addiction, depression, anxiety, and trauma. They never seek help because of stigma. In this podcast, host Stephen Hayes and his guests share their stories of recovery in order to encourage others to do the same. Here's Stephen.
Welcome back to another episode of the Stigma Podcast. Today, we have Nicki Tessler with us from Universal Health Services, UHS. UHS does a lot in the behavioral healthcare space, as I'm sure you know. And one of the things Nicki has built is this innovation hub inside of UHS for entrepreneurs where they can come to UHS and work with UHS, get investment from UHS, and find ways to partner and work with UHS facilities, and then maybe even eventually expand into the broader UHS platform. So it's a really cool tool and feature for the entrepreneurial ecosystem around behavioral health. So she's going to talk about that and how she found her way into the behavioral health space and really how behavioral health found her, as she says, which I love that language. So I'm excited to share this with you. Without further ado, Nicki, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for inviting me to this conversation. But I do want to first say how I appreciate you, Stephen. So innovation is too important to leave to the faint-hearted. And honestly, the journey, as you know, is fraught with doubt, including being second-guessed at times. And you've sustained the effort and are leading the charge to stand in behavioral health's future and embrace it bravely, and then help people like me and others stand there as well. So I value you so much for that. Thanks for having me.
That's the nicest thank you for coming on answer I've ever had. Thank you. Well, I'd love to have you tell our audience a little bit about your background and what you're up to and how you found your way into the behavioral health space.
Sure. So a little about me. I'm a psychologist first and foremost. So I was trained heavily in the psychoanalytic school of thought and believe the true magic and work emerges through the vehicle of the treatment relationship. I have had the great fortune of treating many patients, from pregnant moms that are bravely confronting AIDS to those characterized as criminally insane. And it has been truly the great honor of my life to work with some of the bravest humans, and as well as the staff that I've been so lucky to serve. So my career began at Jackson, and I started in time to think about the notion that clinicians could also be important thought partners to administration. And for those of you that don't know Jackson, it is this extraordinary public health system in Miami, Florida. And it was a system that frankly stole my heart. I began taking on different roles that straddled clinical acumen and operations and realized the impact that I could have on the business side of behavioral health. So I went back to school to receive my executive MBA in health sector management and policy. And then from there, I positioned myself in a role that centered on strategy, which is where I was introduced to innovation, and the alarm bells went off. Ultimately, I became the CEO of Jackson Behavioral Health Hospital, but behavioral health innovation would then become all I thought and dreamed about, and compelled me with this deep sense of purpose and fierce passion to reinvent the field. I then left the public health sector, and then I arrived at the private sector. I served as the Regional Vice President for Behavioral Health Operations at HCA, which is another wonderful company, by the way, managing the operational and financial demands of a large book of business. And then in late June 2018, I took on the Divisional Vice President role at UHS to emerge and thrive from business as usual operations to build and lead cutting-edge behavioral health with a deep understanding of strategy, innovation, and technology. And I wanted to share just a few fun facts about the fantastic UHS company. So UHS it's Universal Health Services, and it's one of the largest and most respected providers of hospital and healthcare services. We have built an impressive record of achievement and performance, growing steadily since our inception in 1979 into an esteemed Fortune 500 company. Annual revenues in 2019 were around $11.4 billion. And in 2020, UHS was recognized again as the world's most admired companies by Fortune and ranked 281 on the Fortune 500. It is headquartered in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, and we are lucky to serve 90,000 employees, and through its subsidiaries, operates 26 acute care hospitals, 328 behavioral health hospitals, 42 outpatient facilities and ambulatory care access points, insurance offering, a physician network, and various related services located in 37 states, DC, Puerto Rico, and then the United Kingdom. In 2019, for example, we served 3.5 million patients across acute and behavioral health. The final thing I want to say is that quality patient care is the cornerstone of UHS's mission. The behavioral health team delivers industry-leading outcomes in patient satisfaction. So patients rated overall care at 4.5 out of 5 in the patient satisfaction surveys. 91% felt better at discharge than when admitted, and 90% were satisfied with their treatment. And finally, 86% would recommend the facility to someone needing treatment.
Thank you for that. I think it's really helpful for folks to understand what UHS does. And really, UHS, in my opinion, is kind of the leader in treating people for behavioral health conditions. I mean, I think a lot of people, don't know that. I think most people have heard of HCA. I think a lot of people have not heard of UHS.
Yeah, I'm so happy to represent UHS so that the world can know the good work that's being done in this space, because it's such an important space, as you know.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is around innovation. How does UHS think about innovation in the behavioral space?
It's no secret, honestly, that behavioral health care sector needs transformational change. It's not been working from a level of cost or a level of humanity. And I think what UHS is all about is this commitment to leveraging this time as an opportunity to advance behavioral health care through the crucial insights of innovation so that we finally are no longer the underdog in healthcare. I think, UHS is smart enough to realize that if we only optimize yesterday's business model, we're inviting disruption. So as a result, reframing our view of the behavioral health field, rethinking what the customer needs, for example, understanding deeply the associated patterns of innovation, we then harness our intimate knowledge of behavioral health industry to our advantage. We pick up trends and patterns we want to foster, and then we reimagine how behavioral health might change people's lives. So we zig while the other people are zagging.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you about around innovation is this concept that there's this balance in innovation around behavioral health, because you have to move fast and break things as an entrepreneur. You have to go fast and build exciting new things. But if you do that in this industry, you break things, you're breaking people. So you have to balance it with effectiveness and science. And so how do we innovate in behavioral health, move fast, break things, but do it without harming people?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that the way I conceptualize it, at least, is the idea that we have to look at different shifts and be smart about it. So there's got to be a methodical way and a systematic way from which we approach innovation. And to your point, make sure that we always, and I use the word always, are sensitive to the precarious and the fragility of healthcare, right? Care is at the center, the patient is at the heart, and that can never waver. And so when we look at innovation, we try to look at it from a systematic way, like I was saying. So there's, for example, as I think about the future, there's 3 shifts that we focus on. We focus, and the purpose is to help others kind of join and collaborate and partner around these shifts so that we can, again, make sure we use the rigor and the thoughtfulness you're talking about to effectuate change in the important ways. So the first would be behavioral health business model shifts, focusing on configuring behavioral health assets, capabilities, and other elements of the value chain to serve patients and make money differently. The second is behavioral health platform shifts by focusing on reinventing, recombining, or finding fresh connections across behavioral health capabilities and offerings to create new value for customers. And then the last one is customer experience shifts. And that's where we focus on connecting and serving and engaging our many customers in distinctive ways. So we're influencing their interactions with our enterprise and our behavioral health offerings. But all of those shifts are respected within a context and a frame that is truly a discipline, right? That has internal controls, that has the approach necessary to do exactly what you're saying, manage the sensitivity of this field while also not holding it back.
And you've been responsible for some innovation focus inside of UHS, is that right?
Yes.
And I read something in your bio, and I read a little bit about this innovation hub that you've worked on. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I'd love to. So in August, we launched our innovation hub so that we had a place to develop, test, and grow new business solutions outside of the UHS processes and deliverables. We wanted a place to have the audacity to do behavioral health differently. And our goals were threefold. So we wanted to build the innovation capabilities within the behavioral health division. We wanted to grow our business through innovation and develop new products at speed and urgency, and promote entrepreneurship and attract talent. New generations are more demanding for spaces to build new concepts, as you know. So our objective with the Innovation Hub is to build a thriving innovation ecosystem where we support a culture of innovation while continuing to seek growth and profits from our legacy business. So we balance the need for innovation with the need for discipline, which is the strong internal controls I alluded to earlier. It's not about how good we make the Innovation Hub. It's about how good it makes our division and our partnerships when entrepreneurs use it. So essentially, we want to be the initiators of innovative surprise versus the victims. And large groups of people, including and especially entrepreneurs, are needed to translate breakthroughs into technologies, cares that save lives, and strategies that change behavioral health. So the Innovation Hub is not doing things slightly better than last year or being new and improved. It was built to raise our sights to define behavioral health's version of game-changing customer outcomes. So what we do is we focus on little I's or little innovations, which are incremental innovations that enhance daily operations, and then big I's or big innovations, which are disruptive innovations that change the performance and shift the paradigm of behavioral health. So we fiercely pursue big I innovations independently from the core business, at the same time acting on multiple little I's closer to home. So what this allows is UHS to fully participate in both the old wave, which is playing the game better, and the next one, which is changing the game. So how did we accomplish that? Well, we built a governance structure and coalition, and we created an innovation portfolio management team to help support the betas approved and provides insulative resources. Essentially, it is set up as an innovation funnel that buys the option to evaluate new ideas while developing a consistent flow of high-quality ideas. Key elements in driving internal productivity improvements is to help protect margins. And then, of course, key aspect of differentiation is we deliver optimal patient outcomes, attract partners, and gain market power. We have corporate funding attached to the Innovation Hub, as well as an innovation incentive program for the employees. The ultimate goal, honestly, is for UHS to develop itself as a two-speed company. Speed one being our core behavioral health business, where it's highly optimized for dependability, performance, efficiency, and profitability. And speed two, which represents keeping pace with the digital disruption. Establishing speed two requires a level of organizational agility to keep up with the new competitors that are emerging and the changes to the landscape. The end goal is to achieve incremental improvements in speed one, which is our core business, and big innovation bets in our speed two initiatives beyond it.
How do entrepreneurs find their way to the Innovation Hub? Are these people coming to work and build in the hub? Are they employees? Or are they entrepreneurs that are coming to you and kind of working with you as in sort of an incubator type relationship?
So right now, how it's configured is that we have the hub set up in the portal for internal submission. So what occurs is entrepreneurs typically tap me to talk through what their solution is. We then pair them with a facility so that they can use that facility as a test bed. Sometimes it's a market of facilities and it's not just one. And we use that as a 90-day pilot beta to determine outcomes, and those that are the most viable and determine, the ROI that makes sense for UHS and for the entrepreneurs, it then gets scaled across the company. And so that is where the governing coalition comes in. So we have kind of a one-layer innovation steering committee to manage the betas. And then that second layer is the executive committee for those that are actually scalable across the company.
So after that 90-day period, what does success look like? So if I'm an entrepreneur, I come to you, I pitch you my idea, you like it, you let me try it at a facility. At the end of 90 days, what hurdle do I need to hit to be able to scale and roll out more broadly within the UHS platform?
Yeah. So again, this is why the structure and some of what we talked about earlier makes so much sense. We have an ROI innovation calculator that we use so that we can track during the beta the impact that it's having. And sometimes, as you know, in behavioral health, it's not always hard value, such as financial metrics, and it can be more of soft value through some of the quality or the clinical metrics that are so important to our field. All of that's baked into the innovation calculator that we use and work with entrepreneurs so that throughout it can be tested. And again, there's agility and flexibility needed, right? So if we're not seeing an impact in one area, or what's happened, honestly, is you see surprises where there's impact in areas you didn't even imagine, then you can harness that as you get going through those 90 days. So that way, at the end of it, that ROI has essentially been defined and that value proposition is generated.
So what is the entrepreneur profile? Who is the entrepreneur that should approach you? What works well? When you get a pitch from an entrepreneur building in the behavioral space, what is it that usually gets through the filter and makes it into the program?
So what I typically say is that it's really important to entrepreneurs to first think in terms of the behavioral health industry, that innovation simply isn't about what you are doing differently. So oftentimes what we look for is about what will create genuine value. And the way I see it, and hopefully this is helpful to entrepreneurs, is that there's 3 buckets of opportunities for entrepreneurs for innovation at UHS. One is around behavioral health configuration. So it's not about what stage an entrepreneur is at. We've participated in hackathons where ideas were just being honestly birthed, or, those that are established companies or tech firms. It's really about, to me, these 3 buckets. So the first being behavioral health configuration. So this is where focusing on the innermost workings of the behavioral health enterprise and its business system. For example, like when you target network innovation, in order for entrepreneurs to take advantage of behavioral health companies and systems, even outside of UHS, it would be processes, technologies, channels, brands, any component of their business. And these innovations can help entrepreneurs capitalize on their own strengths while also harnessing the behavioral health capabilities and assets of the company. Configuration also includes process innovation. So, for example, one of my favorite areas that I like entrepreneurs to focus on is proactive and precision behavioral medicine. So we can detect patterns of patients' needs and behaviors and proactively intervene using predictive analytics and treat every patient as a unique individual with frequently interwoven issues of medical and psychological needs. The second bucket is behavioral health offerings. So entrepreneurs who focus on a behavioral health company core service, right, or a collection of its products and services is another way to think about it. It's important for entrepreneurs to understand how their solutions connect or bundle together with the company's service offerings to create a robust and scalable system. And I think that goes beyond UHS. Any company that they're thinking about should think through fostering interoperability, integration, other ways of creating valuable connections between otherwise distinct and disparate offerings. So for me, for example, product system innovations are really important because they help build ecosystems that captivate and delight customers and also defend against competitors. In our field, that's incredibly important, complicated, but very important. So for example, entrepreneurs can assist companies from moving away from a supply-driven behavioral healthcare system, organized where providers reside, toward a patient-centered system organized around what patients need. Innovation really needs to help replace today's fragmented behavioral health systems in which every provider offers a full range of services, with a system in which services for behavioral health are concentrated in care delivery with coordination that offers high-value care cycles. A further example is entrepreneurs can serve as drivers of change in both payment reform and innovation. And then the last bucket that I think is important for entrepreneurs to think through is behavioral health experiences. Entrepreneurs can focus on customer-facing elements of the behavioral health enterprise and business systems. For example, service innovations and how entrepreneurs support and amplify the value of behavioral health services. But as you know, while human beings are still at the heart, this type of innovation is increasingly delivered through electronic interfaces, remote communications, and other surprisingly impersonal means. I think a really big need is more personalized treatment in behavioral health, as this can be the most striking and prominent part of the patient experience. And this leads to patient engagement, which is so important for those too scared to seek help or resistant, given how hard the work can be in therapy or treatment. So what if we fostered compelling interactions? Patient engagement innovations are all about understanding the deep-seated aspirations of patients and using those insights to develop meaningful connections between them and behavioral health systems.
There's something you mentioned there about patient engagement and getting people involved and motivating people to take care of themselves. And how do we get these people that don't want help to get help? And let me frame that a little bit. So I think of the space, I think of mental health, there's not enough help out there, right? And there's really, most people say there's three things that are preventing everyone from getting help, and that's stigma, it's the cost of care, and it's access to care. And I think there's a fourth bucket, which is I think people just don't want to be well. And that may sound counterintuitive, but you talk to an alcoholic that's out drinking, they don't want to be well. They want to stay in their addiction. So how do we get people that don't want to be well to engage with behavioral health care before they get to a position where it's emergency, acute care?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I almost feel like that is solving that is like the hardest work I've ever loved,
That's the $1 million question.
It really is, because I think what we need to do is, so I see there's a parallel process to behavioral health and to people and human beings that you're describing that are fearful or not wanting or willing or even able to get help. And I think there's something going on, and this is what just drives me. And that's that I think we have to, and I say you and I collectively, work hard at helping people break free of diminished expectations of behavioral health. So first and foremost, we've got to figure out how people can see behavioral health as more than just merely ordinary, because otherwise we can't realistically expect many extraordinary ideas to emerge or thrive. And I think the same goes for people. So if we don't recognize that if we lower our expectations, our hopes for people, that then just keeps us stagnant and keeps us held back. And honestly, we remain the underdog in the field. If you talk about a person and you raise the sights on the person, so if I'm looking at you and I see you as being better than what you think you are, and then I approach you that way, that's all that we could ever hope for. Because what happens is people meet you where you're at. So my question is, how do we get innovation and how do we get the field to rally around that concept that we raise our sights on people that are in the bucket you're talking about, and we actually see them capable and more able than what they think they are. And subsequently, we see behavioral health care as more capable than what they think they are as a field, then I think we're on to something, and I think we have something to work with. A lot of work from there. But I just don't think we spend enough time understanding that people at their core are responding to what they think about themselves. So if I don't have empathy or kindness for myself, it's never going to happen. Well, if you don't have empathy and kindness for yourself, let's first start with empathy and kindness for our field. And if we're able to achieve that component of it, then we've opened that closed door, or that dead end is now this open green field for us to actually go after all these patients that are not patients yet, or would make great patients because they would have, we would be building those lives worth living. It would be incredible.
So a follow-up to that is, if you could build anything, if you had unlimited funding, you could build any solution as an innovator, as an entrepreneur in the behavioral health space, what would you build? And I'll give you an example. So my answer to this question is, I would build a Humans Anonymous, kind of like AA, but take out the alcohol and the stigma of addiction, and maybe even take out some of the stuff that turns people off here and there. And I would create this vulnerable environment where people could come be honest with each other once a day for an hour. And I'm telling you, I think it would change so many lives, because that program is absolutely amazing. And I wish everyone could have that. How do you build that and make money and make it a sustainable business? I have no idea. But that's what I would build if I could build anything. What would you build if you could do anything to help humans with their mental health?
Oh my God, I love that question. And I love your answer. And I think we should talk more about it. I think it would be like an imperfect lab. I think at the core of a lot is, shame and things that people struggle with that make them feel vulnerable, their imperfections, whatever they may be. And I think if we created some sort of a lab where those imperfections were not just embraced, they were celebrated, they weren't like normalized or neutralized. They were, this is part of who I am, but it doesn't need to define me. And that vulnerability could actually be a positive so that people that are ashamed of the many stigmas and differences that exist in the world, instead that they're able to kind of work through that. And that goes through if you think of any contextual factor in the world, people can feel that way about a medical condition, to sexual orientation, to an addiction, to your gender. I mean, we could talk for a whole nother podcast on racism and all of what we could talk to through that. And so to me, what if we stood up a lab? What if we thought through where we could embrace imperfections and take that vulnerability that I think so often holds us back and allow us to work through it? Again, that empathy and kindness comes into play. And then on the other side of that, you've got people that have the self-efficacy that they could only hope for. And then they can go after life and enjoy connecting, intimacy, and all the things that I think they're stolen from them through these quote unquote imperfections.
I love the idea. I love that name, the Imperfection Lab. I'm sure someone's gonna take advantage of that. That's a great idea. I love it.
Thank you.
So if there's a founder, an entrepreneur out there that's hearing this and they're thinking to themselves that getting in touch with you or connecting with UHS would be a good idea, maybe they want to be a part of the Innovation Hub, or maybe they just think that UHS would be a great early customer or a great pilot customer for them, what's the best way for them to approach the organization?
So it would start with me. I would say that what typically happens is to have an initial conversation to talk through where they're at, what their solution, platform, idea even is, and it's almost more of a tactical and strategic huddle, those 30 minutes, than anything else, so that I can set the stage in terms of what are UHS's pain points, right? What are things we're looking at? What is it that they're offering? And then how does it fit? Like I told you, nothing is flippant. Everything has been very deliberate and purposeful on our end. So everything for us resides around a dual perspective, like core and then beyond core innovation. So if UHS is looking at it from a stance of straddling protection and reinvention, right? What happens in those conversations with me is making sure that we have a good understanding of the strategic framework or the innovation playing field and how that aligns to UHS. Is it about optimizing our core right now, reshaping it, or is it about creating the new, And so what then would happen is if we came up with, okay, this is, what we think would be a nice defined pilot, I pair them up depending on facilities, markets, CEOs. Obviously, we have different types of treatment centers, from addiction medicine to residential to acute inpatient, and obviously medical as well. I love the concept of a medical behavioral integration. So we then pair them with the right facilities to then submit to the Innovation Hub what that beta would be. Now, what I can tell you as you look ahead to the next page is in October, we'll be working with Harvard and MIT to build the Innovation Hub from the outside in so that it can become an open innovation channel. So right now, there's some constraints as you hear them, right? There's some not ideal layers that they have to go through me or through a facility to a direct route. But that's because we're trying to make sure we stand this up and build it out right, so that the 2.0 of actually being an open innovation channel where they'll just go and plug right to our Innovation Hub, that will all be set up the right way, both from an inside out and an outside in perspective. Because honestly, at the end, what we were trying to do is well position ourselves so that we can pursue everything from incubating to acquiring, even growing these innovation solutions you're talking about, and be the best partners we can by taking entrepreneurs and refining the ore of their solution and shaping it to make it a commercially viable or sustainable business. And together, I think the end result looks like winning today and setting ourselves up to win tomorrow. And like I've said over and over again, showing behavioral health that we're capable more than we think is possible.
So what's the best way to get in touch with you? Is it email or LinkedIn, or is there something on the website? How does an entrepreneur reach out?
So yes. So my email, should I just say my email?
Yeah, sure. If you want to. Yeah, go for
it's Nicoletta, Nicoletta.Tessler, not to be mistaken for Tesla, TESSLER @UHSinc.com. Yes, I'm very, I'm highly on LinkedIn, so anybody can find me there. A lot of people connect with me there, and we schedule from there. So if LinkedIn's even easier for people, feel free to tap me there.
And I'll link to all of this in the show notes so people will be able to find it easily there. What did I miss? What did I forget to ask? What should I have asked?
I don't know. I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I'm not sure I can think of anything that you've missed. I think we've hit on a lot. That
makes me feel good. So thank you for saying that. I'm sure I missed something, but this has been awesome. I love our conversations. I love the one we had on the phone a few weeks ago. I've enjoyed our interactions. I think this is really insightful and helpful. And I'm just really grateful that you made time to do this.
Thank you. But really, the pleasure is all mine. It's funny because I think a lot of time people ask me, why did you go into behavioral health? And my response, I think realistically and candidly, is really, I think behavioral health found me. So to me, this passion that we share is so much bigger than insignificant me, And so to have this opportunity to talk about what it could look like for us tomorrow and the promise and the potential, I can't think of anything more meaningful or rich. And I'm a huge fan of yours, and I think our relationship's just getting started. So I look forward to that as well.
I like what you said about behavioral health found me. I mean, I'm in the same boat. I think the people I've met in this space that are doing the most to help the most people would agree with that it found them. I was off doing my own thing, living in my addiction, undiagnosed mental illness, and not taking medication, not seeking help. And I was useless. And then recovery found me. And then that led me to working in this space. And so it's interesting. I find that story pretty frequently that people had a reason to find their way into this field. And then even though maybe they didn't set out to get into it from the beginning, they do. And then they're really effective.
Yeah. And how lucky are we that you chose to use your talents in our field? I think that there's the silver lining, right? Because as you know, it's not always the sexiest of service lines. We don't compete with for-profit centers like cardiac and cancer and some of the others, And so to get talents and get people behind it in such an important way with those, ridiculous brains, like yourself, that's what we need. I mean, if you think about the pieces of the puzzle, there's a part of it, the people, operations, and strategy around this.
You're too kind. Like, I killed a lot of those brain cells before I got sober. So, I don't know that I'm at 100%, but I'm doing the best I can. But look, I thank you again for being here. I'm really, really grateful that you took the time to do this.
Thank you. I'm so happy to have been here. So thanks for having me. I'm grateful.
I just wanted to mention another special thank you to Nicki for coming on. We're going to link to her email, to her LinkedIn, a number of the things she mentioned, all in the show notes. So anybody who's looking to get in touch with her or UHS, which probably is going to be every entrepreneur that listens to this, you'll be able to do that easily. To our listeners, thank you so much for being here. And please, if you like our content, please hook us up with a subscribe or a like or a review on your podcast platform of choice and share us with a friend. We also have a Patreon account where our loyal supporters can support our content creation, which will be linked in the show notes. And on that page, the Patreon page, we include detailed write-ups of our market update episodes, in-depth market analysis that we create. We share a lot of the research we're digesting that gets us smarter on the behavioral health market. So That's a unique way for us to interact with our listeners and to support our content creation. To the founders out there, don't forget to join the Mental Health Startup Slack community, which you can find a link to that in the show notes as well. And most importantly, we really want to hear from you. Please do comment on social media. Let us know what you liked or what you want to hear more of, what you didn't like, what you disagree with. You can reach out to us on Twitter at StigmaCast. You can find us on Instagram at Stigma Podcast. You can email us info@stigmapodcast.com. And you can find our website at stigmapodcast.com, obviously. Thank you again for being here. That's it. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thank you for your support.